I have everyone's attention. So, good afternoon, everyone. On behalf of the Institute of Political Studies and Ignite at Brookhaven, we welcome you to the first IPS event for the spring semester. Ignite is a nonpartisan national organization dedicated to building a pipeline of women leaders poised to flex their political power. Corporate money is frequently used to influence ballot measures to elect, re-elect, and upseat candidates at state and federal level. According to New York Times, women in politics don't raise as much money as their male counterparts because they haven't had the same network of business connections or the fortune to self-fundraise their campaigns. Unchecked political spending by corporations, unions, special interests, and wealthy individuals is silencing the voices of citizens, having a lasting impact on who can or cannot get elected. Therefore, I am happy to introduce our guest, Joan Ridley, who is here to speak about getting big money out of politics. She earned her BA from the University of Daytona and was an independent registered investment advisor for 20 years and a consultant to lower mid-market businesses for 15 years. Currently, she is a Dallas team leader for the North Texas American Promise Association. American Promise exists to empower, inspire, and organize Americans to win the 28th Amendment to the Constitution, a lasting reform that puts the rights of the individual citizens before the privileges of concentrated money, corporations, unions, political parties, and super PACs. For more information, please visit AmericanPromise.net. We are honored to receive Ms. Ridley as our guest today, but before we welcome her to the podium, please turn off or silence all electronic devices to ensure the presentation is not disturbed. Now, please join me in welcoming Joan Ridley.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Oh, can you hear me? I tend to walk around no matter what they tell me I should or shouldn't do. I went to the University of Dayton, by the way. Does anybody know anybody who's gone there? It's out in Dayton, Ohio. Before I get started, Audrey, my colleague up there, is got these sheets to hand out. If you want to learn more about what we're talking about, this is not a way for us to raise money, I promise you. It's just a way to access a lot of information you might not know existed. So she's going to be handing out these sheets. You can't hear me? No. Oh, and it's, how's that? Is that better? Yes. Okay. Okay, so let's get started. Does anybody know where this came from, this little cartoon? No?
Newspaper clipping, I imagine?
Very good. But before that, there is a story, and it's one of my favorite stories, about this lady who had these two little identical twin sons. One was a real pessimist, one was a real optimist. Well, the optimist was fun to deal with. The pessimist, he was not so much fun. So she took them to a psychiatrist to find out, how do I deal with these little guys? So the psychiatrist opens the door, he takes the pessimist in first and closes the door, and this little guy looks around, all he sees is a pile of manure. And he starts kicking and screaming, and he's shouting, and he's just being obstreperous, and he's impossible to deal with. So the shrink takes him back to his mother and takes the optimist in and says, closes the door, and he looks around. He says, by golly. And he looks around, and shrink says, what are you looking for? He said, by golly, with all this manure in here, there's got to be a pony in here somewhere. And that's what this cartoon is about, because what it's saying is that there's got to be a democracy in this pile of money somewhere, and this guy is shoveling to find out where is the democracy. And that's kind of what we're doing. Okay. This is going to be a problem because I roam. Can I hold this?
Yes.
That would be better. Okay. Corporations are people, right? Oh, really? The 2010 Supreme Court decision said that's not true. And what they said, what we're going to talk about is, what is it? What was that Supreme Court decision? We're going to talk about how did we get to this point, because this is when we all woke up in 2010 when the Supreme Court decision came down. And what impact is it having on us? And if we don't like it, what can we do to change it? So what was this decision? It said, free speech clause of the 21st Amendment prohibits the government from restricting independent expenditures for political communications by corporations, including nonprofits, labor unions, and other associations. Those few words open the floodgates. How are we going to get rid of this? Open the floodgates for money to pour into our campaigns. It was during the Obama administration, which was kind of startling because what was Mr. Obama? A constitutional law professor. Meet Mr. Lewis Powell. Does anybody know who Lewis Powell is from your other courses?
Not that I know of.
No? Okay. He was a lawyer for Virginia's largest corporate law firm. He also was a member of a board of directors for a Virginia tobacco company. Now remember, this was back in the 60s when Virginia's major industry was tobacco. He was a member of something called the League to Save Carthage. He was appointed to the U.S. Supreme Court by Richard Nixon, which is kind of interesting because Richard Nixon also established what? The Environmental Protection Agency.
So we did some good.
Uh-oh. Who's the guy in the peanut gallery? Is that you? Okay. But he wrote something called the Powell Memo, which was requested of him by the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, which he was active in. And what the memo said was, under a constitutional system, especially an activist-minded Supreme Court, the judiciary may be the most important instrument for social, economic, and political change. That is an amazing statement. Now, you need to know that when that memo was written, Mr. Nixon did not know about it. And he didn't know about it until after the nomination was confirmed. Because Mr. Powell did have sometimes a bit of a more moderate leaning, and that's what Nixon might have liked about him. But he didn't know about the rest of this, Powell's position. Because what Powell's agenda included was he especially wanted the corporations to have a voice in how we are governed. Because what was happening up till then is that there were a lot of regulations being passed, a lot of laws that had to do with protecting the environment. Oh, what an idea. And things that were the corporations didn't like. They thought, wait a minute, we're being walked all over by the government. We don't like it. And that's when Powell got started. He said corporations should have equal time in the high schools, colleges, and universities. Up until that time, what was being taught is maybe what some would consider a more liberal viewpoint. But the corporations, Mr. Powell thought they should bring in professors to talk about corporate rights. What rights do corporates have in a society? But it was much more than that. They were trying to get the students on board with that way of thinking, get them into the corporations and get the ball rolling to get more corporate rights. Powell thought they should have equal time in the media. Let's hear from these corporations, these corporate leaders, and their viewpoint. This is the big one, more lobbyists. You're going to see how what he did and that Supreme Court decision in 2010 caused an explosion of lobbyists in DC on K Street. Also, he thought the corporation should have a right to get involved in political action, to actually influence legislation. And it actually started going further than that. They could buy politicians. And the judiciary advocacy. It went much beyond advocacy. So the U.S. Chamber of Commerce has played a major role in this movement. Here's the impact of what Powell did. There was an expansion of DC lobbyists. In 1971, we had 175 lobbyists on K Street in DC. By 1982, we had 2,000. There was an explosion of corporate political action committees, and lobbyists went from 300 to 1,200. Growth of think tanks funded by the Koch brothers, the Mercer family, fossil fuels, and the financial service industries. This is what is driving a lot of our legislation today.
Money and businesses?
That's it. And influence on judges. Now I put on in quotes because if you will do some reading, and I do encourage you, I love to read, I do. If you will read, here's a good book, Democracy in Chains. This will show you how this movement was planned long ago. And it outlines for you their whole strategy. It doesn't matter what political party it was, really doesn't. You could say it's Republican. I would even say it wasn't even that. Here's another one. Jane Mayer, she's a well-known journalist. I think she writes for the New York Times. But she wrote a book called Dark Money. And it's fabulous. It takes you through, and it's fact. These books are all fact-driven. There's nothing political about this or anybody's opinion. It's all fact. I'm going to share another one with you so I won't forget. This is written by Larry Lessig, Republic Lost, and he is a Harvard constitutional law professor. Not easy. It's not hard reading. It's just I don't think the book is well edited, but it's great information and it's all fact. Okay. But they talk about, one of the things they talk about is the judges, how the corporations are wining and dining our judges, including our Supreme Court judges, weekends at fancy resorts, all kinds of things, gifts, all sorts of things. I say influence on judges, it comes dangerously close to bribery. What else did he do? Well, because of his activity, we wound up with a court case called Buckley versus Valeo, 1976, which says that political spending is an act of free speech. There were several court cases that went on since then. One says that corporations are people, therefore people have the right of free speech, the First Amendment. And then it wound up with Citizens United in 2010, and which said that there should be no limits on corporate or union spending independent of campaigns. That we know of. The other one you don't hear so much about is the Speech Now versus the Federal Election Commission in the DC Circuit. No limits on contributions to independent groups. This gave rise to the super PACs, political action committees. So it's been a series of things that's been going on for quite a while. So I ask you, I'm giving you hints. What are some issues that are important to you right now? Just shout it out.
Climate change.
Climate change, great.
Domestic violence.
Domestic violence. Healthcare.
The attack on drugs because they're our public enemy number one.
Oh, the attack on drugs. Okay, what kind of drugs?
It's narcotics like heroin, marijuana, cocaine.
Okay, that's legitimate, okay. It seems like no matter what, mine happens to be gerrymandering, by the way. That's how I got into this big money thing. I'm usually out speaking. I've been speaking about ending partisan gerrymandering for many, many years. Does everybody know what that is? That's the census comes up, it's coming up in 2020. They redraw the voter district lines and they make sure that in Texas, the legislators draw the lines and they make sure they draw them so that their party remains in office. They know exactly where you live, exactly how you vote, they know everything about you. They're going to make sure that you are included in their district or not, and it'll determine whether your vote really has a voice. So gerrymandering is how I got started on this, and when I realized nothing was being done about it, I realized it was because of the big money that was funding these politicians that weren't, and the Supreme Court. There were major cases in front of the Supreme Court in last year now, 2019. Supreme Court once again said, we're not going to deal with this. So it's all about big money. So do you think your government is listening to you? What do you think? How many of you vote? How many here in this group vote? Okay. Do you think legislation that's being passed on the state and the national level, do you think it really reflects how most people feel about issues based on those issues we just had up on the screen? Mm-mm. Mm-mm. They're thinking about their next campaign. So this is what's happening. Money talks. Big money screams. So let me tell you a story about this young guy. He runs for the U.S. House of Representatives. We'll call him Joe Rep. That's easy. Joe Rep is real excited. He's been out campaigning. Do any of you work on campaigns? Do you knock on doors or go out and get people to vote or anything? Okay. These people work hard to get elected. And I truly believe that these candidates want to represent us. Joe, our example, somebody said health care. That was his big issue. He wanted to make sure that his constituents had access to good health care because it was bankrupting people. And they were going without good health care because they couldn't afford it. So that was his thing. So he gets elected. But along comes Daddy Big Bucks. Daddy Big Bucks.
He's the corporate greed.
You got it. He is the big shareholder, major shareholder of a major drug company. And she says, I don't like this. I didn't want this guy to get elected, and I'm going to make sure he doesn't get elected again. So what's he do? He's got a candidate. He knows he can spend a lot of money and get him elected. Federal law says he can give him $2,800. Big Bucks has lots more money, so he wants to give millions. He gives millions to a super PAC. Give as much as he wants, right? Because he's part of a corporation. And then he gives a lot more money to something called dark money, another PAC. But if you give to dark money, those 501c4s and C6s of the Internal Revenue Code, they do not have to disclose their donors, whereas the PACs do. So he gives a few more million to independent spending. No limit there either. You know these ads that you see on TV or on the radio or on Facebook or wherever you go on social media?
They're attacking each other.
Somebody's paying for it, you're right. And he's spending money to put out attack ads on the guy Joe Rep, he doesn't want to win. And he can give millions and millions of dollars. And this isn't like Michael Bloomberg, by the way. He's giving his own money. He doesn't need PAC money. So millions and millions and millions of dollars are going into this campaign funding. But that's not the end of it. It gets worse. If you are a foreign citizen, name any country you don't like, that foreign citizen can establish a corporation in the United States and start giving money. But most likely it's going to give to the dark money organizations because it doesn't have to be disclosed where the money came from. And then that money can give even more to the PACs and to independent spending. We have no idea where this money's coming from that's funding these ads that we're all hearing. And they don't have to be ads. They could be documentaries on TV. They can be anything. And we don't know where the money is coming from. Uh-oh, poor Joe Rep's in trouble. Poor Joe Rep. He didn't want to spend all his time raising money. Do you know how much time the typical legislator on Capitol Hill spends raising money? Want to take a guess?
A lot.
Yes, it's a lot. What percentage of his time?
Probably maybe 70 to 90.
You're right, 70%. They spend as much as 70% of their time raising money. Do you ever, when you watch TV and you're watching Mitch McConnell or Chuck Schumer or somebody on the Senate floor and making a speech, and the camera's on them and there's nobody behind them? There's nobody there. You know where they are? They're out raising money. I'm not kidding you. That's what's happening. So Joe Rep, he starts calling his wealthy individuals and friendly super PACs, people who support health care. But he's not spending his time doing what he really went to do, meeting with constituents, reading legislation, which, by the way, you know who writes the legislation?
Congress?
Nope, the lobbyists.
Oh.
The lobbyists, and then they get together with the staffers. They are the ones writing our legislation. So who actually gives money? Over 70% of all money contributed by individuals, federal candidates, PACs, parties, and outside groups comes from less than 0.5% of all Americans. So you get a tiny little bit of Americans actually funding all of these campaigns. And you can find it on the internet if you feel like it. You can go to, in Texas it would be Texas Ethics Commission, and they have long list of all these contributors to campaigns and how much they give, and it's startling. The same names keep showing up. Very few people are given all this money, and they're often in the banking industry. In Texas, they're going to be in oil and gas. They want fracking. They don't want fracking to go away. Over $1.3 billion was raised in the midterms for campaigns. $1.3 billion. Do you know how much public education that would pay for, and all the things that we said that on those issues that were important to us? We're spending it on campaigns. And if you like numbers, this is where it comes from. Trade associations, unions, super PACs. I mean, and look at how it took off in 2010. Remember, that was a Citizens United Supreme Court decision that opened up the floodgates. That's when it started in 2010. And I understand, I saw a figure the other day what's going to come into Texas. You know, people are afraid it's going to turn purple or blue. So all that money is flooding into Texas already. So I want to talk to you about the impact of big money on business. Now, this comes from a Republican senator named Jim Rubens from New Hampshire. And Audrey, who's here with me somewhere, there she is. We, American Promise people from Texas, we had the largest delegation. We went to a conference in DC in October to hear about the effects of big money and all these issues. Got to meet with a lot of interesting people, but one of them was Jim Rubens, who was a former senator from New Hampshire. And as a Republican, he got up and he spoke and he said, "This is why I don't like big money in politics. It's wrecking our governance. First of all, it's reducing new business formation." Now, I was a business consultant for 15 years, and I know when I started, Texas was third in the country for new business formation and entrepreneurship. We're going down the list. It reduced research and development. The crony capitalism is more profitable than a corporation actually doing what it needs to do to compete. Like, how about serving your customers? If they can fund a campaign for a politician who will vote for legislation that will put dollars in their pocket, why wouldn't they do that? Why would they bother to go out and actually do research and do things for consumers like us? This is cheaper. Big business crushes competition from small businesses. Let me give you two examples. One is, I was getting my car repaired, and I was talking to one of the guys there who does estimates, and in conversation I found out he was a city councilman from Grand Prairie. And he knew I was interested in this sort of thing. He said, "Well, our city council's hopping mad because we have AT&T and Comcast and some other media companies. They rent space from our city, a public land, to put up their towers. And we always negotiated directly with those corporations. Now the state, in the 86th session, the last session that just closed in May, has decided, they passed a law saying how much we could get from those big companies as rent revenues. So now, the city of Grand Prairie, Dallas is another one that's complaining, the amount that they can negotiate to charge those corporations to rent land space to put up their towers has been capped. And that came from a state law, and it's hurting the cities. They're losing revenues. In fact, the city of Grand Prairie is now suing the state. Another one would be, there's another one that came dangerously close to passing, and that was, do you all like craft beer?
No.
You don't? I do. And the beer industry, the wholesalers, anybody, the big associations involved with distribution of beer, they got a law introduced into the state legislature that almost passed that would prevent the craft breweries from selling beer that can be taken off the premise. And remember, those craft breweries, you'll find them in restaurants and everywhere. The The law didn't pass, but it came very close, and it would have very much hurt all these small entrepreneurs who would make this wonderful craft beer. But that's just two small examples. Another one is building materials. The state of Dallas actually had a pretty good quality control over the type of materials that could be used when we build our buildings in the city of Dallas. Well, the state somebody introduced a bill, it came from some building material manufacturer, that now tells the city of Dallas the quality of materials we can use when we're building buildings. And it's lower than what we had. And they can't do anything, the city can't do anything about it. Except they could sue the state, I guess. And of course, big money has resulted in big tax reductions for corporations. The bills are still coming in, and you and I are going to pay for it because our taxes are going to go up because corporations are paying less. And for every $1 of lobbying, the corporations get $1,000 in grants and contracts, and it's paid for by our tax dollars. So this is what big money is doing, and it's associated with businesses. It's hurting businesses. So didn't our founding fathers see this coming? You mentioned you were in a history class recently, maybe this morning. I love history. And if we had time, I'd bore you to death about how this all relates back to our early history. They did see it coming. They really did. But it didn't look like what it is today. Our founding fathers, James Madison, George Washington, John and Sam Adams, and all those guys, they were more worried about monarchy, but to them monarchy meant money. And they did not want money ruling our country. They wanted entrepreneurship and a free society. So they did see it coming, but it didn't look like what they thought it was going to look like. And they did everything they could in the Constitution to protect us. But remember, James Madison had to horse trade to get that Constitution ratified. You all knew from your courses that he was having a tough time because he wanted a strong federal government, and he had all these other founders who wanted state sovereignty. That's what they called it at the time. They didn't call it states' rights. So he had to create language that's maybe a little bit ambiguous to get that thing ratified. So that's why we have a lot of issues going on between state and federal government. So they saw it coming, but it didn't look like they thought it would. So we can pass an amendment to solve this problem, or at least curtail the influence of big money in governance. Who would support such an amendment? Well, you'd be surprised. 75% of all Americans want to see an amendment passed. 66% of Republicans, which is startlingly high, but a lot of them are business owners, remember? And 85% of Democrats and 70% of independents. So there's a very, very high buy-in from the citizenry. And if you know anything about the passing of the 19th Amendment, this is the 100th anniversary of the 19th Amendment being finally ratified to give women the right to vote. Do you know how long it took to get to that point? 72 years? You knew that, didn't you?
Well, yeah, but it actually resulted after women also went on to the White House. The women were protesting and even going on to the White House lawn.
That's right. They went through a lot for 72 years. And we hear of Susan B. Anthony, but it was Elizabeth Cady Stanton also. They actually died right after that amendment was finally ratified. 72 years it took. But look what it had to be overcome to get to that point. Men, who were the only ones who could vote, didn't want women to vote because they thought we weren't smart enough. We should be home cooking and doing all the things women do. Well, heck, ladies, we can do it all, can't we? So it took 72 years. This is nothing. The huge percentage of Americans want us to pass an amendment to reduce the influence of big money in politics. This is easy. Larry Lessig, he wrote one of these books. He is a constitutional law professor at Harvard. And he says that 96% of Americans think that it's important to reduce the influence of money in politics, and yet 91% think it's not possible. But it is. He calls this the politics of resignation. He wants to thaw that resignation. He thinks such an amendment has a real chance of passing. So why would we want to do an amendment? There are other ways, I suppose, we could change this. Because it's permanent and it's nonpartisan. You see the buy-in from this to getting this amendment passed, Republicans, Democrats, and Independents. It corrects a series of mistakes. Remember I said there were a series of Supreme Court decisions over a number of years, decades actually. So there have been, Supreme Court doesn't always get it right. Prohibition is one.
Well, yeah.
There's that, yeah.
Yeah, they started out with, yeah, it worked, but then because of all the mob and bootlegging and
didn't work so well.
Yeah, so they repealed it 13 years after it started.
And this is the same thing. We're eating our young. I mean, this is a monstrous mistake and a march toward the loss of our constitutional republic. And a vast majority of conservatives, liberals, and independents think this is doable and want to do it. So how do you pass a constitutional amendment? Well, there are actually 4 ways, but there's only one that's really been used, and that is you propose a bill, and it must pass the House by 2/3, the Senate by 2/3, and then it must be ratified by 3/4 of the states, which now is, of course, 38. And we have 20 states have already passed resolutions where they have said if an amendment to reduce the influence of money in politics comes to us, we will sign it. We're well on our way. There are actually 4 bills in the U.S. House and Senate. There's 3 in the House, 1 in the Senate. American Promise doesn't endorse any particular one, but we do like this one, House Joint Resolution 2, because it has the greatest support. Over 200 members of the House of Representatives have already signed on to support it. And that's remarkable. And it says that, I'm going to read this because I want to do it verbatim. Congress and the states may regulate and set reasonable limits on raising and spending of money by candidates and others to influence elections. Congress and the states may distinguish between natural persons and corporations and other entities. Right now, we can't even bring a lawsuit because it's law. It's constitutional law. But what we want to do is open the door for those lawsuits. So what can you do? You could demand that your legislators support a constitutional amendment. And that's what we're doing at American Promise. Speaking of American Promise, this is our founder, Jeff Clements. A little bit about Jeff. Jeff is the most gifted speakers and just a very gifted man. He was a litigator, and he was involved in litigation with the tobacco companies, spent a lot of time reading their documents, and was appalled because they definitely had, you remember this, some of you, definitely there was plenty of research that showed what smoking does to your health. Not just to you, but to everybody around you when you're smoking.
What do you expect? Hey, some people are just getting, other generations of Americans are just smokers with subliminal.
This is my shill. He just took my line. Do you know what corporations call that? As people are aging out, they're dying off, maybe from smoking or something else. They're stopping smoking, but still living. They needed replacement smokers, and that's what they called people like you, people in college, people in high school. Right in their documents, they were calling you replacement smokers. And this got Jeff really angry. He said, I'm going to do something about this. So he actually at one point was the Assistant Attorney General in the state of Massachusetts. But then he went on and founded something called American Promise, which is a national, nonprofit, nonpartisan organization. We actually have 2 issues we look at that we're promoting, the ending of partisan gerrymandering, but we're focusing in Texas mostly on getting the big money out of our politics and governance. We have chapters in 15 states, 39 chapters. We have one in North Texas. And we're doing pretty well, actually. We're going to the city councils and saying, would you please pass a resolution that we can take to our state legislators and our U.S. legislators and say, bring us an amendment, we want to sign it. We want it signed. The cities want it signed, and the people who live there want it signed. This is actually a little old because we have a lot more support than you would think. But this movement is going very, very rapidly. And just so you know, we are the only organization espousing this. There are 3 others that I know of. The only difference is we are nonpartisan. There are 3 others that I know are partisan, but they are also pushing for this amendment, and we work together. We work together at every opportunity. So I want to close with a direct quote from Jeff Clements, because I think it kind of sums it all up. Because what he's saying is, big money is drowning out your voice and mine. It's very difficult to get in to see your own legislator unless you're a big donor. And what he says is equal citizenship has been transformed into a class system with super citizens whose wealth, we are told by the Supreme Court, entitles them to more representation, a louder voice, and more privileges than anybody else. And this pretty much sums up what we're all about. So if you want to learn more, Audrey is passing these around. We need to know how to contact you, cell phone, text, whatever, to let you know where are the resources to learn more, or if you want to let your legislator know, I don't like this, I want it changed. What we do is we are letting our legislators know there are people in your district who want you to sign an amendment to get big money out of politics. And with that, I want to say thank you very, very much for having us, and we really appreciate it. Does anybody have any questions? What time's lunch? Yeah.
So, until there is an amendment, if there is one, what can we do to combat big money and dark money? So, for example, my representative is being opposed by someone who's been essentially placed there that they think will beat him. And like, what do we do if?
I think, well, certainly vote. I mean, that's the big thing. Get people out to vote. That's a big thing right there.
Anybody else want to sign?
Get people out to vote. And sign things like this. Come to our events. We are going to Washington. We met with we had 125 people that met with, I can't remember, I know I met with 4 or 5 legislators on Capitol Hill in October with the American Promise delegation. It makes a big impact. When a constituent shows up on their doorstep, it makes a big impact. Write them letters, write letters to the editor. Talk to us. We've got a whole list of things that we do. Writing letters to the editor is doing real well, because what we do then is like I will send, if the letter the editor mentions, say, Colin Allred, I will make sure his staffer sees that letter to the editor. Now, not going to do much good because he was one of the sponsors of that bill. But it's very important that they see it. If you have friends who are independents and Republicans, we especially need to get them involved, because I don't think they realize how much this is impacting their quality of life. And, you know, it sounds like it's all Democrats behind this. No, we have Republicans, a lot. I'm an independent, for instance. I vote both ways. So get people involved in one of these organizations. Start reading. And if you're like me, you'll get so angry, you've got to go out and do something. So I write letters to the editor. I love going out to speak. I want to go to churches to speak. If you know of any church that will have me, I would love to go speak. I think education is a huge part of it. I really do. How can you hear these facts and not get angry? You know. So anyway, any other questions? Okay. Oh. Yeah.
What do you make out of the intersection of former politicians like cabinet members and legislators who've become lobbyists?
Oh, that's another one. That's all part of it. Because without this, they wouldn't have been lobbyists to begin with, probably. And some actually go into the legislature so that they get some some voice and standing, then they and get the contacts, then they come out and become high-paid lobbyists. So this is all part of that mix. Because when I realized that it was the lobbyists who are hired by the corporations who are actually writing the legislation that becomes bills, I mean, that's not of the people, by the people, and for the people, you know? It's not it. So that's all part of it.
Didn't Walmart's lawyers write most of the trade agreements with China?
That's what I've heard. I never actually read it, but I've heard that. But it's pretty common. They sit down with the staffers and they start writing the legislation, and they have bought the right to do that because they paid for that candidate to get into office. It's a vicious cycle. You combine that with gerrymandering, you got real problems. I do believe our democracy is in trouble. I believe it. I do a lot of reading in history. This is bad. This is really bad. So we need to get out there. And I'm just so excited to see all the students getting involved. We welcome them into our organization. We have one young woman. She went with us to Capitol Hill. She's from Oklahoma. And she was fabulous in front of those senators and members of the House. She was I think she was in drama, taking drama courses. And boy, could she spin a story. I mean, she was great. So we welcome young people. Anyway,